Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into a place most people never leave. No, not IKEA on a Saturday. We're going somewhere darker, deeper, and far more glittery, a royal tomb tucked beneath the sands of ancient Egypt. The air is dry and still. Dust floats in lazy spirals through beams of torchlight. You take a cautious step forward. Beneath your feet, stone tiles carved with spells, names, warnings, some cheerful, some not so much. You pass murals of gods with animal heads, priests in stilted poses, and a pharaoh with arms crossed like he's about to drop a mixtape called Mummified and Magnificent. You've just died. Congratulations, but death here isn't the end. It's the beginning of a very long weekend in the afterlife, and you've got some packing to do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Always fun to see how far across time zones we're stretching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the burial chamber, cool, silent, and packed tighter than an overachieving student's backpack. The ceiling's painted like the night sky, filled with stars and sailing deities. In the center, resting regally, is you, or your body at least. You look pretty good, regal, serene, definitely dead. But the Egyptians believed that if everything went according to plan, your spirit, was just getting started. Now here's the thing about ancient Egyptian beliefs. They were obsessed with preparation. The kind of people who not only packed an umbrella just in case, but also a backup umbrella, 4 scrolls explaining how to use the umbrella, and a priest to say nice things about your umbrella at your funeral. They believed the afterlife mirrored this life, but better. So naturally you'd need to bring your stuff, and not just your favorite sandals or that one cup you refuse to let anyone else drink from. Oh no. We're talking serious luggage, but before any of the treasure, before the scented oils and miniature armies, the first thing you notice is the coffin, or rather coffins, because one wasn't enough, or 2. Nope. You're nestled inside a literal nesting doll of sarcophagi, 5 layers deep if you're lucky, wood, gold leaf, stone, even layers of bitumen for waterproofing like the world's fanciest Tupperware. And this wasn't just for show, every layer had symbolic value. The innermost coffin, snug, ornate, and possibly claustrophobic, cradled your mummified remains. Then came another, painted with divine eyes to watch over you. Then another with protective spells. Then another because someone had a flair for the dramatic. And finally, the outer sarcophagus, huge, heavy, and carved from limestone, shaped like a human form, painted with eternal eyeliner and a polite smile. Mainstream historians agree, this multi-layer approach wasn't just aesthetic, it was spiritual armor. But here's the quirky bit. In some cases, the outer coffins were clearly recycled. That's right. Some noble somewhere got bumped for a last-minute royal. You can still spot the chiseled-out names beneath the paint if you look closely. Ancient Egypt, land of eternity and budget constraints. As you lie in state, one arm awkwardly frozen mid-pose, you're surrounded by all the trappings of elite embalming. The scent of resin and frankincense still lingers. Your face, covered with a golden mask, molded to match idealized features. Youthful, symmetrical, and very much not how you looked on laundry day. Even your fingers and toes are covered with tiny gold caps. Wah! No one's quite sure. Some think it symbolized invincibility, others argue it was fashion. Historians still debate whether this was about divine perfection or just high-status bling. The walls around you hum with images, priests performing rites, gods guiding your journey. Anubis, jackal-headed and ever stoic, hovers over your embalming scene. Thoth, with his ibis head, scribbles in divine shorthand, and of course Osiris, green-skinned god of the afterlife, presides over the whole affair like the ancient world's strictest customs officer. Outside the burial chamber, you can almost hear the chants echoing from the opening of the mouth ritual, meant to magically restore your senses. In theory, after that you could eat, drink, talk, and most importantly, answer questions from the afterlife's version of airport security. It's all very official. There are incense burners shaped like cobras, chants in Middle Egyptian, and enough white linen to swaddle an army. The priest touches your lips with special tools, a ceremonial adze, a miniature spoon, even a stone chisel. In this context, these weren't horrifying dental tools, they were divine wands meant to wake your spirit up. The process may seem eerie to us, but for the Egyptians it was comforting. Death wasn't scary, it was structured and predictable, and if you followed the script like a guest at an extremely elaborate destination wedding, you'd be just fine. Still, there's something intimate about lying in that tomb. Even if it's grand, it's quiet. You start to realize just how much went into this send-off. Not just wealth, but devotion. Dozens of artisans, scribes, embalmers, and priests, all working in tandem to make sure you didn't just rot in the desert, because rotting was the worst-case scenario. Eternal preservation was the goal, and if your body survived, your soul might too. That's why they wrapped you tight. So tight, in fact, that modern CT scans have shown broken bones, missing hearts, and misplaced amulets, all signs of over-enthusiastic wrapping. And let's be honest, you look like a burrito that took a wrong turn at a fashion show, but under those layers there's purpose. Amulets tucked between your ribs, scarabs by your heart, even little spells scribbled on linen strips. One prayer, known as Spell 30B, literally begs your heart not to stand against you during judgment. Ancient guilt trip, anyone? And as you rest beneath layers of fabric, gold, stone, and ceremony, the final door to the tomb seals shut behind you. The living leave, the torches die, and you wait. For eternity, or the next section of this story, whichever comes first. Section 2, you're still lying there, absolutely wrapped, sealed, and stacked like a spiritual lasagna. And now that your body's comfortably boxed in a sarcophagus 5 layers deep, it's time to check the rest of your luggage, because this isn't just a trip, it's the ultimate vacation, forever. And you didn't pack light? Let's start with your weekend bag. And by bag, we mean ornate, wood-inlaid chests stuffed with everything from sacred scrolls to your best party sandals. Some boxes are simple, others are carved with scenes of your triumphant life, hunting, sailing, or graciously receiving offerings like you're the host of some celestial cooking show. Inside, objects so personal they practically whisper your name. Here's the fun part. Your packing list includes furniture. Beds, chairs, stools, even headrests which, yes, look like tiny guillotines, but were actually ancient pillows. Try balancing your head on one of those without waking up with a crick in your eternal neck. And then, nestled among these essentials, come the coffins, plural. Let's talk about that for a second. You're cocooned inside layer after layer, like some glamorous sarcophagus nesting doll. The outer coffin, huge and commanding, meant to dazzle both gods and grave robbers. Often carved from stone and painted with elaborate protective spells, it's your first line of defense against the chaotic energies of the underworld, or nosy archaeologists. Slide 1 layer deeper, and you find the wooden anthropoid coffin, shaped like a person, with eyes open wide like you're trying really hard not to miss your afterlife flight. Inside that, maybe another coffin, this one more intricately painted, with winged goddesses stretching protectively across your chest. They're not just for decoration. According to mainstream history, each layer played a specific symbolic role. One aligned your body with Osiris, another guided your Bia, your personality soul, on its nightly wanderings. Still another was inscribed with a checklist for your final judgment, just in case you forgot your lines. Historians still argue whether every coffin was custom-built for the deceased or if some were repurposed, basically whether ancient Egyptian nobles had access to a spiritual IKEA. Archaeological evidence shows that occasionally inner coffins bore the names of someone else, hastily scratched out and re-inked. Oops, bit of a name-tag mix-up in the hereafter. But let's talk about your inner coffin, the one that snuggles your mummified body like the world's fanciest weighted blanket. This one's all about aesthetics, made from gilded wood or cartonnage, a kind of ancient papier-mâché. It's painted with lapis blue hair, almond-shaped eyes rimmed with coal-black coal, and a serene smile that whispers, "Don't worry, I rehearsed for this afterlife." And the craftsmanship? Stunning. Paints made from crushed gemstones, inlays of faience and gold, symbols covering every inch, ankhs, eyes of Horus, winged scarabs, cobras poised to strike. These aren't just decoration, they're passwords, spells, and charms meant to fool demons, blind monsters, and guide you through bureaucratic underworld checkpoints. Fringe fact, some tombs have revealed decoy coffins, empty containers sealed up like the real thing, just to confuse robbers. Think of it as ancient Egyptian misdirection. Oh no, you opened the wrong sarcophagus. Try again in the next chamber. Good luck. Of course, there's always that one uninvited guest. Damage. Some coffins were split by the sheer weight of stone lids, others were scorched by candle mishaps or tomb humidity. And don't forget termites, the eternal nemesis of wooden eternity. Archaeologists still debate how some royal coffins remained pristine, while others seem like they survived a crocodile disco. And speaking of crocodiles, don't worry, we're getting to those. But first, coffin artistry. When you tilt your inner lid, let's pretend you can, you see spells from the coffin texts or the Book of the Dead. Ancient Egyptian bedtime stories for the recently deceased. They're written in neat vertical columns, usually in black and red ink. Red was for scary words, like names of demons. Black was for the calm stuff, like how to grow ghostly wheat. The texts read like part spiritual guidebook, part cheat sheet. Want to know what to say when a crocodile-headed guardian asks for your blood type? There's a spell for that. Need to turn into a heron, lotus flower, or sacred serpent to escape danger. Yup, covered. In some burials, the entire inside of the coffin is a scroll, pages upon pages of magical directions, the ancient version of downloading every survival manual in PDF and taping them to your bedroom walls. Practical, if a little exhausting. Then there's the symbolism. The face painted on your coffin doesn't always look like you. Sometimes it resembles the god Osiris, complete with green skin and a false beard. Because in death, the goal isn't to look like yourself. It's to look divine. You're auditioning for godhood. No pressure. A few elite burials even included life-sized guardian statues positioned beside the coffin. Think funeral bodyguards with serious, do not disturb vibes. Made of wood or metal, they stood watch over your slumber, weapons in hand, brows eternally furrowed. Whether they actually scared off grave robbers is up for debate, but they certainly looked cool. One unusual discovery: a coffin painted inside with stars. Not around it, inside it, so that even in death your spirit would gaze upon the night sky. That kind of detail speaks to a people who didn't just believe in eternity, they tried to decorate it. And perhaps strangest of all, sometimes the face on the coffin was removable, held in place by pins or clips. No one knows exactly why. Maybe it was a practical embalming feature, maybe it was ceremonial. Or maybe, just maybe, the gods wanted to see your reaction when you woke up. So while you lie perfectly posed, swaddled in linens, hugged tightly by coffin walls, your eternal roommates are these intricate cases, each one a message, a shield, and a work of devotional art. You packed light. Not even close. You packed like a cosmic overachiever. But hey, you're going to be gone for a very long time. Section 3. So now you're comfortably wedged in your layered sarcophagus suite, and things are quiet. A little too quiet. You know what that means. It's snack time, because what's an eternal weekend without a decent meal? Or, say, 40. You didn't think you'd be drifting through the afterlife on an empty stomach, did you? Please, you're Egyptian royalty. You're arriving in the next world with a full stomach and an even fuller buffet. Around your tomb, stacked neatly in painted jars and reed baskets, are your favourite foods. Dried figs, roasted goose, round loaves of sourdough bread with thumbprints still visible on the tops, like your chef left you a snack and a high five. There's salted fish, dates still sticky with syrup, and even small clay pots of beer. Yes, beer. Because ancient Egyptians were nothing if not hydrated. The stuff was thick, slightly sour, and made with emmer wheat, more porridge than pilsner. You'd drink it through a straw to avoid the chunks. Tasty, debatable. But spiritually, essential. This wasn't just for pleasure, it was fuel for your soul. Mainstream historians agree that food offerings weren't symbolic fluff. The ancient Egyptians genuinely believed these provisions had spiritual substance. Each offering was magically activated during the burial rituals. Priests would perform elaborate spells to make the food metaphysically nourishing. Otherwise, you'd be stuck nibbling on spiritually inert breadsticks for all eternity. And it wasn't just any food. The menu had range, honeycomb, trussed duck, cucumbers, lentil stew, even small cakes shaped like cows because sometimes dessert should moo. You even got preserved cuts of meat wrapped in linen and labelled like divine deli slices, foreleg of ox, rib section of goose, basically ancient Tupperware. Nothing says love like individually wrapped roast. Now here's the quirky bit. They sometimes included model food. Tiny carved ducks, painted clay loaves, even miniature granaries with sliding doors. The logic? Symbolic backups. If the real stuff went bad, your spirit could use the replicas. Kind of like bringing a printed photo of your passport just in case. Historians still argue whether these model foods were seen as equally edible in the afterlife or if they were more like placeholders, a sort of spiritual decoy system. But given the detail on some of these carvings, we're talking sesame seeds carved into tiny stone bread, it's clear someone thought this mattered. Then there were the offering tables, stone slabs with carved grooves for pouring libations, water, milk, wine, or more beer. The tables often included lists of ideal offerings chiseled right into the surface. 1,000 loaves of bread, 1,000 jars of beer, 1,000 oxen. Basically, your dream grocery list if your grocery store was stocked by demigods. The math doesn't check out, but the sentiment is clear. More is more. You weren't supposed to go hungry, not even once. An empty stomach in the afterlife wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. Hunger could weaken the soul, make you vulnerable to demons, or worse, force you to haunt the living out of sheer hunger. And you know what else shows up in these food inventories? Onions, tons of them, raw, cooked, whole, chopped, worn as necklaces. Egyptians revered onions. They believed the layers symbolized eternal life, plus they worked as a decent preservative. Downside? Your tomb probably smells like an underworld sandwich shop. Let's not forget garlic. Cloves wrapped in linen were tucked into tombs not just for flavor, but for protection. Garlic was thought to ward off illness, spirits, and possibly nosy archaeologists. Ancient tombs, aromatically seasoned and slightly spicy. One unusual but verified find, a mummified leg of beef found still in its box, sealed with the name of the donor, the king's chief butcher. Imagine making history because you packed a ribeye for eternity. That's legacy, and don't even get started on the jars. Pottery was everywhere, stamped, painted, lidded, sometimes inscribed with "Do not open," which archaeologists naturally ignore. Inside, oils, honey, fruit paste, occasionally something less recognizable. One open jar turned out to contain a mixture of fat, beeswax, and possibly some kind of pungent resin. Historians still debate whether it was food, medicine, or failed afterlife hummus. Still, you have to admire the thoroughness. There's something oddly touching about the care taken to ensure you wouldn't starve, that your cravings, yes, even in death, mattered. Because remember, this wasn't some quick trip. You weren't going to the underworld for a weekend getaway, you were moving in, indefinitely. And that meant preparing for every possible craving. Now there's one more food-related wrinkle, the false door. This was a carved panel, often set into the west wall of the tomb, the direction of the land of the dead. It was believed that your spirit double, could pass through this door to receive offerings left by family or priests. Real or symbolic, it didn't matter. The door was the interface, the portal. The tomb's eternal room service window. Families would return on feast days, place fresh loaves and jugs before the door, and whisper prayers. Maybe your cousin poured out beer while muttering about how expensive embalming was. Maybe your daughter left a fig tart and a tear. Either way, the gesture mattered. It kept you connected to the world of the living. Some false doors were simple, some were architectural marvels, pillared, inscribed, framed in stone with your name repeated over and over, because repeating your name kept you remembered, and being remembered was halfway to immortality. That's why your tomb is covered in text. The walls, the pillars, the statues, even the undersides of your beds are scribbled with prayers, recipes, hymns, names, every inch a message to the gods and your own shadow self. You lived. You mattered, you are not forgotten. So as you lie in your sacred chamber surrounded by an army of sealed jars and meticulously bundled roasts, know this: the ancient Egyptians believed feeding the dead was feeding the divine. Your soul would rise, restored on the scent of roasted duck and beer foam. And if that doesn't sound like comfort food, nothing does. Section 4, you're full now, or at least your KA is. Spiritually satisfied by an all-you-can-eat offering buffet, but as you lay there, entombed and embalmed, you start to feel something is missing. That's right. You're underdressed. Sure, your body's tightly wrapped like a fashion-forward burrito, but this isn't just about modesty. No respectable soul would show up in the afterlife without some serious drip. And when it comes to ancient Egyptian burial fashion, we're talking gold, linen, gemstones, and just a splash of mystical symbolism for flair. Let's start at the base layer, linen. Ancient Egyptian linen was famously fine, woven from flax fibers, spun so delicately that the best kinds were nearly transparent like gossamer spider silk. You're swaddled in dozens of layers of it. Some tombs reveal bodies wrapped in over 300 feet of linen. That's enough to gift-wrap your ego and your regrets. But it's not just quantity, it's the quality that mattered. The elite dead were buried in pleated tunics wrapped with care and often perfumed with incense resins like frankincense and myrrh. The result? You smell like a luxury candle store, not a decomposing memory. On top of that fine linen, there's the bling. And oh, is there bling? Gold rings on every finger. Toe caps, yes, toe caps, hammered from sheets of gold and slipped onto your mummified digits like you're attending a very exclusive undead gala. There are finger stalls too, gold thimbles for your eternal manicure. Earrings, collars and wide bracelets jingle softly in the quiet tomb air, even if no one's around to hear them. Historians are pretty sure this wasn't just vanity. Gold was considered the flesh of the gods, especially Ra, the sun god. Wearing it in death was like putting on divine skin. You weren't just honoring the gods, you were trying to become them. A little creepy, maybe, but ambitious. One artifact that shows up often, the Wesek collar. Imagine a massive, semicircular necklace that drapes across your shoulders and chest, made of rows upon rows of faience beads, lapis lazuli, turquoise and gold spacers. You'd look like the best-dressed guest at any Afterlife mixer. Now here's a quirky detail. Some tombs have revealed cosmetic items too. Not just for show, actual tools for touch-ups. Coal pots with tiny applicators, palettes still dusted with red ochre, that classic heavy eyeliner. It wasn't just about aesthetics. It was believed to ward off evil spirits and reduce glare from the sun, practical and metaphysical. And yes, men wore it too. In fact, especially in the tomb, where a well-lined eye was a divine eye, because if your gaze could match Horus's, you were already halfway to heaven. Still, you might ask, okay, but a scented cone of fat on my head? Glad you noticed. Some tomb art shows partygoers, yes, even the deceased, wearing white cones atop their wigs or shaved heads. For decades, scholars thought they were symbolic. But recently, archaeologists actually found one, a waxy substance, possibly animal fat, infused with myrrh. The idea was it would slowly melt, perfuming your hair and clothes during rituals. Ancient Egypt, the only place where your hairstyle could double as aromatherapy. Speaking of wigs, yes, you probably had one. Maybe two, made of human hair or palm fibers if you were on a budget, styled in elaborate braids, scented with lotus oil and worn to enhance your posthumous profile. Because bald is beautiful, but a curly shoulder-length unit inlaid with beads, that's eternal fashion. Footwear. Optional. Some mummies were buried barefoot, others with sandals made of woven papyrus or even gold. Gold. Sandals, because what's the point of walking into the afterlife if your shoes don't reflect the sun? Historians still debate whether these burial garments were worn in life or crafted solely for the grave. There's evidence of reuse, tunics patched, sandals mended, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, these weren't brand new fits, but the intent was clear: dress to impress, and don't skimp. Let's not skip the jewelry that carried magic. The heart scarab placed over your chest was engraved with spell 30B from the Book of the Dead, basically a plea to your own heart. Don't betray me in the judgment hall. Sounds dramatic, but hey, when your soul's on trial, it's best to have legal representation in the form of a gemstone beetle. You also had Djed amulets for stability, ankhs for life, Tayet knots for protection. Each one positioned at specific parts of the body. Ancient Egyptians weren't just decorating, they were engineering a sacred machine. Your body, a spiritual spaceship. Your jewelry, the control panel. One bizarre but verified fact. Some mummies were buried with wax figures of gods glued inside their wrappings, not beside them. Inside. Like sneaking a divine action figure into your bandages for comfort. Here lies Horemheb, mummified with 3 Osirises and a backup Anubis. Also worth noting, burial masks. King Tut's is the superstar, crafted from solid gold inlaid with obsidian and quartz eyes that still seem to follow you. But even non-royals got plaster or cartonnage masks painted with idealized features, eternal smiles, and eyes outlined with the same divine kohl. You didn't need to look like yourself, you needed to look immortal. And sometimes those features were aspirational. Older nobles would appear youthful, strong-jawed, wrinkle-free. Think of it as the original Photoshop, except carved in stone and blessed by high priests. Then, layered into the linen, sometimes just under the shroud, you'd find protective nets of blue faience beads, a spiritual mesh, each bead a prayer, each knot a whispered spell. Together, they were a spiritual force field, gentle armor for the soul. By now you're starting to realize this isn't just a burial. It's a presentation, a transformation. You're not lying in a coffin. You're reclining in the launch chamber of your next cosmic phase. And when the priests sealed the tomb, they didn't just walk away. They left you with oil offerings, chants, and maybe, just maybe, a little admiration. Because you didn't just die, you leveled up, wrapped in linen, glittering in gold, and scented like a divine garden. You wait. Still beautiful, dangerous. Holy. Section 5. You're draped in gold, cocooned in linen, and glowing with sacred oils like a divine burrito prepared for ascension. But don't get too cozy yet, we still haven't packed your toiletry kit. Because let's be real, eternity is a long time to feel gross. Welcome to the ancient Egyptian afterlife essentials aisle, where the fragrances are floral, the deodorant is stone-based, and the skincare routine, aggressive. First up, natron. You know that white, salty stuff they used during mummification? It wasn't just for turning you into jerky, it was also their go-to body wash, toothpaste, and everything else. A mix of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, and bits of salt, natron was nature's all-purpose cleaner. They scrubbed the body with it before wrapping, they stuffed your torso with it, and sometimes even left extra piles around the tomb, just in case. Historians agree that natron symbolized purification. But the fringe theory, it was the ancient equivalent of that one friend who swears baking soda can fix everything, including your dating life. Next, your perfume collection. Egyptians were big on scent, not just for masking decay, though, let's be honest, that helped, but because pleasant aromas were believed to please the gods. The sweeter you smelled, the more likely you were to score points with divine judges. Think Chanel No. 5, but made of myrrh, frankincense, lotus oil, and the sap of exotic trees. Some perfumes were stored in beautifully carved alabaster jars, sealed with beeswax. Others came in delicate glass ampoules, yes, glass. Ancient Egyptians were making perfume bottles thousands of years before your bathroom had one, and some tombs even included perfumed cones, yep, like the one on your head, waiting to melt and release their aroma on cue. Want a quirky detail? Some cones may have doubled as slow-release bug repellent, because in death or life, no one wants to be gnawed on by desert gnats. Then there's the matter of makeup. Your tomb is stocked with palettes, grinders, and sticks of pigment, black coal for the eyes, green malachite for shadow, red ochre for lips and cheeks. This wasn't vanity. It was war paint for the soul. You needed your eyeliner not just to look stunning, but to protect your eyes from evil spirits and desert sun. Scholars still debate whether the cosmetic benefits outweighed the magical ones, or vice versa. Either way, smudged eyeliner in the afterlife? Not an option. There's even a cosmetic item lovingly known as the cold spoon, a little tool shaped like a gazelle or a fish used to scoop powdered eyeliner. It was as stylish as it was functional. Imagine Sephora merging with a museum gift shop. Ancient glam, baby. But don't forget your toothbrush. Okay, technically it's a chew stick, a thin twig frayed at one end, dipped in natron. You'd rub it along your teeth and gums for a minty fresh-ish clean. Tombs sometimes included these sticks alongside tiny jars of powdered natron, marked with hieroglyphs meaning mouth purity, because oral hygiene doesn't take an afterlife vacation. One particularly well-stocked tomb even included tweezers and razors. Yes, bronze razors. Ancient barbers knew their craft, and a clean-shaven body was seen as a spiritual necessity. Hair could carry impurity, so you were embalmed bald, shaved smooth, and maybe even polished. The glow-up was real, and then we come to perhaps the most infamous ancient beauty product, crocodile dung. Yes. Really, some skincare rituals included the use of crocodile excrement, possibly mixed with honey or oils. Historians still argue whether it was for sun protection, medicinal purposes, or, brace yourself, fertility enhancement. Fringe theory for sure, but hey, if someone told you smearing croc poo would help you live forever, wouldn't you at least think about it? Also included in some tombs, alabaster jars labelled for the skin, holding creams made from animal fat, beeswax and plant oils. These were believed to moisturize and preserve not just your body, but your essence. Basically, you were being embalmed and exfoliated. A 2-for-1 special. You also had incense burners, beautifully shaped bronze or ceramic implements used to waft myrrh and kai-fi into the tomb air. Kai-fi was a famous Egyptian incense blend made from as many as 16 ingredients: honey, wine, raisins, cinnamon, juniper, frankincense. It smelled divine, literally. Some tomb murals even show the deceased holding a cone of incense like it's the ancient version of a Yankee candle, because atmosphere matters even in the afterlife. And here's an odd but confirmed bit. Some mummies were discovered with pieces of salted meat or fish tucked inside their bandages, not for eating but possibly to flavour the spirit. A sort of divine seasoning, if you will. Historians don't fully agree on this one. Was it symbolic? Accidental? Or was someone hoping to smell like beef jerky in paradise? Then there's the Senate board. Okay, not exactly a toiletry, but definitely a necessary luxury. Senate was a board game believed to help the soul navigate the afterlife. Think of it as a mix between chess and divine Candyland. The pieces, carved from wood, faience or ivory, were included to pass the time, or to earn points with Osiris. You weren't just travelling into the next world, you were gliding in, oiled, polished, perfumed, and carrying a tiny box of eye paint and possibly some beetle-scented deodorant. Because the gods notice the details, so there you are, smelling like lotus, looking like royalty, and moisturized within an inch of your afterlife. And if the divine gatekeepers aren't impressed, well, you've still got the croc dung. Section 6. You're fragrant. You're polished, you've got gold on your fingers and eyeliner sharper than most people's personalities. You've packed bread, beer, perfume, and a few salty jokes from the embalmers. But now we need to talk about your entourage, because what is the afterlife without company? Let's start with the pets. Yes, pets, because the Egyptians didn't just love animals, they worshipped them, literally. Cats were sacred, crocodiles were divine, and baboons, surprisingly popular. If you were wealthy, odds are you weren't just buried with trinkets. You brought along your furry, feathered or scaly companions, lovingly mummified for the long road ahead. Top of the list, the cat. Your cat wasn't just a snuggly roommate, it was a guardian, a hunter of spiritual pests, and a living embodiment of Bastet, the feline goddess of protection and grace. Mummified cats have been found by the thousands, often wrapped in fine linen, decorated with painted features, and placed right beside their owners like whiskered co-pilots into eternity. One particularly spoiled kitty was buried in its own miniature coffin, complete with a beaded collar and a carved lid. That's more effort than most modern weddings. Then there's the baboon. Yes, a full-on mummified monkey. These cheeky companions were associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Some nobles believed a baboon's cleverness would serve them well in the afterlife, like an eternally curious intern who also made funny faces. There's even fringe debate about whether baboons could act as spiritual assistants or if they were just highly respected pets with front-row seats to the divine. Either way, they're here, and they've got the bandages to prove it. And don't overlook the ibis, the falcon, the mongoose, or the occasional sacred goose. That's right, ancient Egyptians loved geese, and not just on the dinner plate. Some were raised and mummified as holy animals, wrapped carefully and buried with honors. Can you imagine the honking in the afterlife? Historians still argue whether these animals were actual pets, symbolic offerings, or ritual sacrifices. Some were clearly cherished. The level of detail in their burials suggests emotional bonds. Others may have been temple animals gifted for spiritual support. Either way, they're your new ghostly roommates. But animals weren't the only ones coming with you. Enter the Ushabti. These little figurines, sometimes called shabtis or shawabtis, were your backup workforce in the afterlife. Made from faience, wood or stone and inscribed with special spells, they were designed to magically come to life when called upon to work, which is ancient Egyptian for, I'm retired, but these guys will dig my fields. And we're not talking about 1 or 2 figurines. In lavish burials, they included hundreds, each one holding tiny tools ready to plow, sow, or harvest celestial crops so you could recline and sip beer beneath the eternal fig tree. In fact, one nobleman had over 400 ushabti in his tomb, one for every day of the year, plus extras in case someone called in sick. Historians love pointing this out as a sign of both spiritual devotion and elite laziness. Each ushabti was hand-painted, sometimes with your name and title, like divine little business cards. Some even wore miniature wigs or tiny versions of your jewelry, ensuring brand consistency beyond the grave. Now here's a delightful detail. Sometimes they came with overseer ushabti, slightly bigger figures holding whips or staffs to manage the others. So yes, even in death there was middle management, but your entourage isn't just pets and magical interns. Sometimes actual humans joined the trip. In certain early dynasties, elite burials included the real servants of the deceased, buried nearby or in adjoining chambers. Archaeological evidence shows these weren't statues, they were people, likely sacrificed or volunteered, history's a little fuzzy, to serve in the afterlife. It's dark, but undeniably part of Egypt's earlier mortuary customs. Later on, as social norms evolved and sacrificing staff fell out of fashion, thankfully, the ushabti became more common, replacing real people with symbolic ones. Still, the idea remained: you would not labor in eternity. Others would do that for you. And let's not forget your family, sometimes not just buried nearby, but honored inside your tomb with paintings, names, or even small statues. Children, spouses, ancestors. They were part of your cosmic web, helping your name live on and welcoming you to the eternal reunion. In royal tombs, you might find carvings of the pharaoh's mother holding an offering bowl or a daughter presenting flowers. These were more than portraits. They were rituals forever frozen in limestone, constantly reenacting the roles of devotion, mourning, and reverence. And in some very elite tombs, musicians. That's right, carvings and statues of women playing harps or flutes. Whether they were real attendants or idealized symbols of joy, the message is clear. Your journey should have a soundtrack. The tomb is filling up now. Every jar, every statuette, every wrapped paw and painted amulet, each has its role. This isn't clutter. It's a carefully constructed symphony of symbols and silent companions. Every object is a safeguard, a helper, a whisper to the gods that says, "This soul came prepared." And you just lie there, wrapped like a royal, cats at your feet, tiny ghost employees standing by, goose fluffed and ready while the underworld awaits your entrance. There's a reason the tomb feels alive even in death. You're not going alone. Section 7. You're wrapped, you're radiant, and you're rolling deep with mummified cats, ghostly interns, and a baboon who probably knows more about hieroglyphs than you do. But you're not getting far without a proper itinerary, because the afterlife, it's not a straight path. It's more like an escape room mixed with a video game, full of puzzles, monsters, and terrifying gatekeepers who ask you questions like, "Have you stolen bread?" Which, to be honest, is none of their business. So now, nestled among your perfumes and amulets, you'll find perhaps the most important thing in your spiritual carry-on: the Book of the Dead. Let's clear something up. Despite the spooky name, this isn't a horror novel. It's more like a manual, a survival guide, how to not get eaten by a crocodile demon 101. The original title was something closer to the Book of Going Forth by Day, which sounds like a motivational calendar, but actually refers to your soul's journey out of the tomb and into the eternal day of the afterlife. This papyrus scroll isn't short. Some versions stretch over 70 feet long, covered in spells, chants, illustrations, and marginal doodles of divine judgment. Your copy is customized too. Scribes tailored the book to your name, your life, your sins, or lack thereof, and even your favorite gods. Think of it as a spiritual LinkedIn with footnotes for how to fight off snake demons. You'll find spells for every occasion, turning into a falcon to escape danger, avoiding being cooked in a fire pit by an angry baboon god, even how to convince your own heart not to testify against you. Yes, your heart gets a say. No pressure. Mainstream historians agree that these texts evolved over time. Early on, it was just for royalty. Then for nobles. Then scribes. Eventually, even the spiritually ambitious middle class got in on it. Want eternal life. Save up for a papyrus scribe, and don't forget to tip generously. Now here's a quirky twist. Some versions of the Book of the Dead included maps. Not to scale, but helpful diagrams of the afterlife's geography. Rivers of fire, fields of reeds, tunnels guarded by deities with names like he who cuts off heads, or eater of shadows. You know, fun landmarks. These maps weren't just pretty, they were necessary. Historians still argue whether the afterlife was a literal landscape or a metaphorical journey of the soul. Either way, the Egyptians weren't risking it. They wanted GPS, preferably with rerouting options, but not everyone could afford a full scroll. So others got coffin texts, spells written directly on the inside of the coffin. Efficiency meets budget constraints, or you might get spells etched on your linen wrappings, on walls, on statues. The idea was, wherever your soul might look, it should find directions. One particularly dramatic spell is known as Spell 125, a scene that will become very important later. It's the one where your heart gets weighed against a feather. We'll get there, but for now, know this. You need to memorize your lines. This is the part where Divine Courtroom meets Talent Show, and you don't want to forget your cue. Beyond the Book of the Dead, there are other texts, the Amduat, the Book of Gates, the Litany of Ra. Each one focuses on different aspects of the journey: Ra's nightly passage through the underworld, the secret names of demon guards, or how to navigate a cosmic river without accidentally steering into a wall of flame. And let's talk passwords. Yes, passwords. You'll meet guardians at every stage: fanged gods, flame-breathing serpents, hippo-headed sentries, and each demands a specific phrase before you can pass. Sometimes it's a riddle. Other times, a declaration like, "I am the one who knows the name of the flame." If you get it wrong, you're dinner. So what do? You cheat. Well, sort of. You brought the answers with you. Some spells were inscribed on amulets sewn into your bandages, others were painted on the walls around your sarcophagus, still others were whispered during your funeral by priests, imbuing your soul with knowledge by sound alone. Think of it as downloading the latest version of your soul's OS, but you're not just reading, you're becoming the knowledge. Spell 43 lets you become a hawk. Spell 83 turns you into a sacred lotus. Spell 135, a flame that cannot be extinguished. Because the Egyptians weren't just worried about ghosts and goblins, they worried about transformation. They believed the soul had to adapt, shapeshift, flow through forms in order to survive. Stagnant spirits didn't make it. Agile ones did. There's even a spell to become a crocodile, which, if you think about it, is pretty clever. What better way to survive a crocodile-infested underworld than to join the club? And buried among these sacred texts, there's always a little personal flair. Your scribe might have added a prayer from your grandmother, a joke from your childhood, a secret nickname only your family knew, because memory was magic. Every word helped tether you to life. One particularly touching find, a spell written phonetically, not in full hieroglyphs but in simplified sounds, so that even a person who couldn't read could still recite their way to salvation. That's dedication. Of course, some tombs have scrolls so poorly spelled they raise eyebrows. Did the scribe rush it? Was this an afterlife prank? Historians still chuckle over one tomb where the name of the god Osiris was misspelled as something like Osrizzle. Probably not what you want on your Judgment Day resume, but yours is perfect. Elegant script, rich pigments, a border of protective cobras and stars. Your book doesn't just tell a story, it is a story. A script for your soul to follow, a hymn, a shield, a travel diary that whispers, "You belong here." So clutch it close as the tomb darkens. The map is set. The spells are learned, and just ahead, beyond the stone walls, the first gate of the underworld creaks open. Hope you remembered the password. Section 8. You take your first step into the underworld, metaphorically speaking, of course. Physically, you're still in your tomb, very much wrapped and reclining like an eternal snack. But your bar, your spiritual essence that can fly by day and return at night, is already on the move. And you're not going alone, because when it comes to rolling into the great beyond, you've brought an entourage, a guidebook, and a full support staff. Remember those little figurines? The Ushabti, they're clocked in, but even they're not your top-tier company right now. Because what you really need are the gods, and ideally, the powerful ones. Now, Egyptian religion didn't exactly run on a tight hierarchy. It was more like a sprawling divine family reunion, with gods for the sun, sky, air, chaos, cats, beer, childbirth, crocodiles, and one suspiciously attractive cow-headed goddess. But when it comes to getting safely through the underworld, you've got a few key deities on speed dial. First and foremost, Anubis. He's the jackal-headed god of embalming and protector of the dead. If this were an airport, Anubis would be the TSA agent with glowing eyes and a degree in necromancy. He's the one who oversees your mummification, ensures your organs were properly jarred, and guards the scales at your judgment. Depictions show him leading the dead by the hand, calming, composed, and just slightly spooky. You might think he's intense, but in the afterlife, he's your best friend. He's got the keys to the Hall of Two Truths, and he's not afraid to use them. Then there's Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and magic. He's the ancient equivalent of a cosmic lawyer, ready to take notes, recite spells, and record the outcome of your final judgment without bias or emotion. He's got a scroll, a stylus, and the perfect poker face. Basically, the guy you want documenting your afterlife Yelp review. Historians agree Thoth was vital to the order of things. Without him, chaos crept in, and in a world where forgetting one spell meant potentially getting eaten by a soul-devouring chimera, having Thoth on your side is like carrying a backup brain. But the real VIP, Osiris, the green-skinned god of the underworld wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt and holding a crook and flail like he's ruling both sheep and consequences. He's the king of the dead, the judge, and the promise of rebirth all rolled into one mythological monarch. When you stand in the Hall of Judgment, it's Osiris who listens. He doesn't say much, strong, silent type, but trust us, you want him smiling when he looks at your feather versus heart situation. More on that later. And who escorts Osiris across the sky by day and through the underworld by night? That'd be Ra, the sun god himself. Now, Ra is complicated. He's a solar disk, a falcon, a beetle, sometimes a boat captain, because yes, the sun in ancient Egypt sails. Every night, Ra boards his solar bark and journeys through the underworld, battling the giant chaos serpent Apophis, who, by the way, is just a never-ending snake made of pure cosmic nope. You may ride with Ra if you're lucky, joining the gods in this celestial barge, helping fend off demons, singing hymns as the sun prepares to rise again. Imagine being on the guest list for the universe's daily reboot, but you've also got minor gods backing you. Mart, the feather-headed goddess of truth and justice, who literally is the concept of balance. Her feather is what your heart gets weighed against. She's the spiritual embodiment of did you do the right thing even when nobody was watching? And Horus, son of Osiris, who avenges his father, watches the skies, and sometimes shows up with a falcon's head and eyes that shoot truth beams. He's got that cool protective vibe, like a big brother who also commands solar energy and possibly lasers. Oh, and don't forget Isis, Osiris's wife, magician queen, and all-around emotional powerhouse. She's the one who brought Osiris back from the dead, helped their son defeat evil, and continues to inspire devotion well into the Roman era. If you're lucky, she might whisper a protective spell into your bandages. The gods are everywhere in your tomb, by the way, painted across walls, perched on amulets, named in spells. Some sit in judgment, others just stare. There are 42 minor deities known as assessors, each representing one of the moral rules you were supposed to follow. They're the ones who ask the questions in the Hall of Judgment. Did you steal? Did you lie? Did you speak ill of the gods? Did you double dip your bread in someone else's hummus? Okay, maybe not that last one, but their standards are high. You'll need to answer no to all of them. It's called the negative confession, and it's basically an ancient truth or die ceremony. And here's the twist. Even though the gods know if you're lying, the point is to declare your purity, to show you've tried to live according to Mart, that eternal balance of harmony and justice. Still, historians debate whether these confessions were actual moral checklists or ritual affirmations, kind of like telling yourself you're a good person until the gods believe you. Fringe scholars even argue some souls tried to bargain with the gods mid-trial. Bold strategy. Back in your tomb, you've prepped for all of this. There are protective amulets with god names, spells that call on Horus for sight, on Anubis for passage, on Hathor for comfort. The gods are more than stories. They're tools, shields, allies. You've made offerings to them. You've learned their names. You've painted them in gold on your coffin walls. And if all goes well, when you pass through the 12 gates of night, each hour ruled by different gods with names like He Who Devours Bones or She of the Fiery Breath, you'll be allowed through. If not, well, remember Apophis. Yeah, you'd better get those passwords right, but hey, no pressure. You're dressed to impress. You've got a good team, and somewhere in the dark, the prow of the solar boat glows like dawn in waiting. You step forward, or your bar does, and around you the gods begin to stir. Section 9. You're strolling, well, gliding, through the spiritual bureaucracy of the afterlife, credentials in order, spells memorized, gods in your corner. But now it's time to ask the eternal question, who's doing the chores? Because here's the hard truth, even in paradise, there's work to be done. Fields to plough, offerings to process, divine paperwork to file. You might be a glowing beam of spiritual perfection, but that wheat isn't going to harvest itself, or is it? That's where your Ushabti army really steps up. You remember them, those small figurines tucked lovingly into your tomb, some carved in stone, others moulded from faience or wood, each one standing upright like a tiny statue of you or your dream employee. Except they're not just decorations, they're your afterlife workforce, enchanted to handle the boring bits of eternity. You brought them for a reason. Inscriptions on their legs spell it out, literally. Each figure includes a line or two from spell 6 of the Book of the Dead. It goes something like, O Shabti, if I am called upon to do any work, you shall say, here I am, and do it in my place. Translation, if the gods ask you to dig canals or hoe the divine fields, your Ushabti raises its tiny hand and says, don't worry, boss, I got this. And that's not just a nice sentiment. The Egyptians took it very seriously. Nobles packed dozens, sometimes hundreds of these figures into their tombs. In elite burials, each day of the year had a dedicated Ushabti, plus overseers for every 10. Imagine HR managing 365 miniature interns, and yes, they probably had internal reviews. There's even evidence that wealthier Egyptians hired scribes specifically to inscribe names and magic onto these figurines. No inscription. No magic. No magic. Congratulations, your eternal farm just became your job. Some Ushabti were incredibly detailed, wearing wigs, carrying tiny hoes or seed baskets, their faces delicately painted with serene expressions like they enjoy posthumous labor. Some were mass-produced, while others were true art objects, gold-leafed. Inlaid with lapis, they weren't just tools, they were status symbols. A rich afterlife meant having help. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians thought these helpers had actual consciousness or were more like magical automatons, but the consensus is they were essential. Even if they never moved a finger, the belief that they could brought peace. One nobleman's tomb, possibly suffering from a severe case of micromanagement, contained 401 Ushabti, that's one for every day, plus 36 overseers. Some of them even had titles like Foreman of the Eastern Field. That's right, your afterlife came with middle management. But that's just the beginning of your afterlife team. You also brought stelae, carved stone slabs inscribed with prayers and declarations of your worth. Some stelae include lists of your servants, both real and magical. Others include requests to Osiris, asking him to let you sit under a fig tree for eternity, which, let's be honest, sounds delightful. And depending on your status, you may also have included funerary boats, complete with crew figures, sails and rigging. Not full-sized boats, unless you're royalty, but scale models placed in your tomb to help your soul navigate the celestial Nile. Some even include fishers, rowers and pilots, each frozen mid-paddle. The Nile wasn't just a river. It was a cosmic artery. Your afterlife estate likely included a patch of farmland, a little villa, maybe a vineyard, and definitely a stretch of spiritual waterway, so naturally you needed a full staff to maintain it. Carpenters, bakers, butchers. Brewers, some buried as figurines, others as reliefs carved into your tomb walls. One tomb even featured a scene of an entire bakery and brewery, miniature workers grinding flour, kneading dough, and pouring frothy jars of beer. No, it wasn't real beer, but the symbolism meant that it might become real spiritually. The gods were watching, and so was your appetite. Then there's the Heka priests, not buried with you, but part of your prep team. They were spiritual technicians performing the magic that animated your figurines and ensured that the model furniture, jars, boats and beds would actually function in the next life. Without them, you're lying on a fancy wooden couch that does absolutely nothing. Some tombs even featured models of granaries with tiny scribes standing outside holding tally sticks and tiny parchment scrolls. These weren't just cute, they were metaphysical insurance policies. They made sure your house of eternity remained stocked with food offerings and the cosmic equivalent of eternal Wi-Fi. And if your Ushabti somehow failed you, well, that's where your name comes in. In ancient Egypt, the name was a powerful spiritual force. Saying it aloud, writing it down, painting it on a wall, each repetition gave you life. That's why you etched your name into everything. If your Ushabti slacked off and your priests forgot your spells, as long as someone said your name, you could still survive. Which is why some tombs go absolutely overboard repeating names, on pillars, statues, combs, sandals, any flat surface. One noble had his name carved into the bottom of his bed, as if even lying down should echo his memory into the cosmos. Of course, there's a dark side to all this delegation. In some periods, tomb robbers or rivals would try to erase your name. Literally, they'd chisel it off walls, hoping to erase you from existence. No name, no memory, no immortality. Fringe historians argue some early priests may have secretly sold afterlife insurance, promising to maintain your memory for a few extra offerings. Spiritual grift, eternal edition. But let's assume you've done it right. Your name's everywhere, your Ushabti are ready, your granaries are stocked. And your boat, polished and parked. You're not just surviving the afterlife. You're delegating it, so as your spirit drifts onward, maybe you pause to admire your staff. The falcon-headed boat captain nods. The baker bows. The baboon takes a bite of an imaginary fig. Your name is still whispered in 1,000 painted glyphs, and a tiny Ushabti tightens its grip on a stone hoe, preparing to work in your place. Not bad. You've created the ultimate dream team, and you didn't even have to file a single performance review. Section 10, you've got your labor force, your crops are in good hands, your tomb's basically an HR-approved eternal startup. But even paradise can feel a little empty without a good vibe, right? That's why no well-prepared Egyptian soul enters the afterlife without packing one final essential: a killer playlist. Yes, seriously, yes. Music was more than entertainment. It was a ritual technology, a spiritual language, and a metaphysical air freshener rolled into one. If the gods were watching, they were also listening, and you were about to give them a show. So let's build your ancient weekend soundtrack. First up, the sistrum. Imagine a handheld rattle shaped like a horseshoe, with metal rods running across the open top. When shaken, it jingled with a soft rhythmic sound, not unlike wind chimes doing yoga. This wasn't just a noisemaker. It was sacred, used primarily in temples dedicated to Hathor, goddess of love, music, beauty, and probably excellent taste in percussion instruments. You've likely got one buried with you. Maybe a real one, maybe a model version painted gold, its sound forever imagined. When the priests held funerary rites, they'd shake the sistrum in slow, deliberate arcs. The jingling was believed to drive away evil, invite joy, and keep your spirit in tune with the divine frequency. Then there's the Menat necklace, another Hathor-associated instrument. It doubled as jewelry and musical device. Shake it, and it rattled with a gentle clatter. Like wearing your maracas around your neck, practical and festive. But don't worry, strings fans, you're not left out. Your tomb might include images or models of the lyre, harp, or lute. These instruments, made from wood and gut, created mellow, flowing tones that were thought to soothe the soul and lull the heart. If the Book of the Dead was your roadmap, music was your emotional GPS, reassuring you that the journey wasn't just dangerous, but beautiful too. Historians know that music played a big role in funerals. Ritual musicians were often women, shown kneeling beside the coffin, singing with one hand cupped near their mouth. These were the chantresses of Hathor, and their songs weren't just laments. They were invitations, sung messages to the gods saying, "Hey, we've got a good one here. Be kind." One surviving lyric written on a stela reads, "May your heart be light as a drumbeat and your name sweet as a song." That's not just pretty, it's an emotional strategy. Sound was sacred, and with no Spotify in the afterlife, your only playlist was what you packed in your soul. But don't think it was all somber humming and harp solos. Ancient Egyptian music also had energy. In tomb paintings, we see clapping, dancing, and even what looks suspiciously like group choreography. One fresco shows 3 women clapping in rhythm, while another twirls a stringed instrument, her foot arched mid-dance. Quirky fact, some tombs even include clappers, carved ivory hand-shaped instruments used to mark rhythm. That's right, ancient Egyptians had a version of musical applause before you even played. And here's a fringe twist. Some scholars believe that the acoustics of tombs and temples were engineered for specific tones. One temple of Hathor, when studied acoustically, revealed that its stone chambers echoed sistrum sounds in a unique vibrational pattern. It's like ancient surround sound without the Bluetooth lag. As your bar flits through the dark tunnels of the underworld, those rhythmic echoes from the mortal world might follow you like the memory of a favorite song stuck in your head for eternity, and music wasn't just entertainment, it was navigation. Some spells instructed the dead to sing the names of the gates to pass through them. In other words, your voice was a key, and melody was the lockpick. Certain intonations were believed to resonate with spiritual forces, unlocking doors, calming demons, or summoning protection. In fact, one specific charm involved repeating the name of Ra in a precise tone. Get it wrong, you'd end up in a pit. Get it right, you might find yourself surfing the solar barge like a divine DJ. Let's not forget the tambourine, or, more accurately, frame drums. Flat, circular, made from stretched hide over wood, these were often played during processions. Deep, steady beats were said to mimic the sound of the Nile, of heartbeats, of life continuing beyond death. Imagine it. The quiet thunk of skin on drum echoing through the tomb corridor as your body is lowered into the chamber. Not a sound of sadness, but of momentum, like your spirit had started walking already. Historians still argue whether every burial had music performed live, or whether it was more symbolic, represented by instruments and painted musicians. But the message remains the same. Music was a bridge, a comfort, a tool. Even your coffin, if struck just right, might hum. Archaeologists tapping on the lids of stone sarcophagi have noted their resonant tones. It's eerie, beautiful, like the tomb itself wants to sing along. Some coffins include inscriptions instructing the soul to rise with the voice of the drum or walk where the flute leads. It's all part of your post-mortem mixtape, guiding you from the silence of the grave to the harmony of the next life. And once you get there, oh, the party begins. The Field of Reeds isn't just a place of eternal farming, it's a paradise of music, feasting and joy. Paintings show the dead relaxing, listening to musicians, sipping wine under fig trees. The vibe is less somber death cult and more cozy eternal garden party. One noblewoman was buried with a harp, her name etched into its wood, with a prayer. May my song be heard by Osiris, and may he nod in rhythm. That's ancient approval if we've ever heard it. So as you move deeper into the afterlife, remember, your journey is scored. The rattles of the sistrum, the pulse of the drum, the sigh of the flute, they're all playing in the background. And the gods, they're listening. You don't just walk into paradise. You waltz in. Section 11. You drift along the quiet corridors of the underworld, and behind you, soft, steady, the tambourines fade, the sistrum chimes grow distant, and the divine playlist hums to a whisper. It's getting darker now. Not scary, not cold, just deep. This is where knowing the right people really matters, because now, more than ever, you need to have your divine contacts on standby. Not just gods in general, but your personal network, your celestial inner circle. Welcome to the spiritual version of a VIP list, because you don't want to be stuck knocking while Ra's security team checks the guest book. Let's start with the one who sees you first, Osiris. He isn't lounging on a cloud. No, he's seated firmly on a throne in the Hall of Two Truths, green-skinned, white-robed, and flanked by his sisters Isis and Nephthys, with 42 divine assessors arranged in rows. He doesn't speak much, he doesn't have to. He's the god of the dead, the judge, and the standard. If your soul wants in, Osiris has to say yes, and this throne room, it's not just symbolic. The Egyptians believed you'd literally appear before this court, not in your current mummy-chic form, but as a spirit, radiant, complex, a being shaped by every choice you ever made. No pressure. Now, as you glide forward, eyes flickering across the scene, you realize you're not alone. Beside you stands Anubis, ever serious, jackal-headed, overseeing the process like a divine attorney with excellent posture. He gently guides your soul toward the scales of justice. And on those scales, two things, your heart and a feather. Not just any feather, of course, it's the feather of Mart, goddess of truth, balance and cosmic harmony. If your heart is heavier than the feather, if you carry guilt, falsehood, cruelty, then the scales will tilt and you'll meet someone far less friendly. But we'll get to her in a bit. For now, let's go back to your contacts, because this is when it's useful to know the spiritual gatekeepers by name. Ancient Egyptian beliefs had 12 gates in the underworld, one for each hour of the night. As Ra's sunboat travelled from sunset to sunrise, it passed through these gates, each guarded by deities with names like He Who Destroys the Head and She Who Flays the Wicked. You're going to meet them, and they're going to ask for passwords, not metaphorical passwords, actual names. Specific phrases, some of them are weird. I am the one who knows the name of the flame eater, or I have not eaten the heart of a brother. You'll be saying a lot of things with a very straight face. Your tomb texts covered this. Remember spell 145? That laundry list of gate names, guardians, and incantations? It wasn't just filler. It was your keyring. Historians agree these gate spells were seen as protective charms, helping the soul pass unscathed through regions of chaos and confusion. But here's the quirky part. Not everyone had the same list. Some scrolls include extra gates, or combine two into one. Scholars still argue whether the gates were literal stages, metaphorical mental trials, or some combination of both. But fringe interpretations suggest they might have represented psychological thresholds, fears, desires, regrets. If your soul hesitated, you risked getting lost. Fortunately, you're not unarmed. You've brought names. And in Egyptian belief, to know a thing's true name is to hold power over it. That's why so many spells begin with I know you, I know your name. It's part declaration, part shield. Now, assuming you've memorized your answers, you'll be escorted or sail yourself toward the field of offerings, the Tuat. But before you can lounge in that eternal paradise, you've got to pass the big test, the heart weighing. Let's zoom in. Anubis sets your heart on the left pan of a golden scale. Mart's feather rests lightly on the right. Thoth, with his ibis head and scroll, watches silently, stylus poised to write the result. The 42 judges lean forward. Your heart quivers, because here's the thing. The Egyptians believed your heart recorded your actions. Every kindness, every betrayal, every shortcut, every little thing you thought nobody saw. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being in balance. You might be thinking, but what if my heart fails? Glad you asked. Meet Amit, the devourer of the dead. She's not a god exactly, more like an enforcer. Part lion, part hippopotamus, part crocodile. All terrifying, she squats beneath the scales, jaws open, waiting. If your heart outweighs the feather. She lunges forward, gulps it down, and that's it. You don't go to paradise, you don't get reborn. You don't even haunt anyone, you cease to exist. No memories. No spirit, nothing. It's the ultimate consequence. And for Egyptians, this was worse than hell. This was erasure. But assuming the scales balance, and let's be optimistic, you're in. Osiris nods, Thoth scribbles, and Amit slinks away disappointed. The court disperses, and suddenly the dark weight of judgment lifts. Ahead of you, gates swing open, not heavy bronze, but shimmering thresholds of papyrus reeds and sunlight, but you don't walk through alone. You've got allies. Horus steps forward, leading you by the hand. Isis and Nephthys whisper protective words behind you. Ra's solar boat glows on the horizon. You're not just approved, you're welcomed, and behind you the tomb still holds your name. The gods have cleared you, the scales are balanced, the passwords were true. Now you face the final test, not surviving but living, because beyond this hall the field of reeds awaits, and the gods who dwell there expect you to thrive, so go on. The sun is rising, section 12. The golden gates swing wide. You step forward, not with feet because your feet are still back in that cozy linen burrito in the tomb, but with something more elegant, more eternal, your car, your life force, buoyed by light, unburdened by flesh. This is it, you've passed the scales, you weren't devoured. You weren't sent back to repeat third grade in the afterlife, you are approved, official. Stamped by Osiris, you're now a resident of the field of reeds, Sekhet Aru, the Egyptian paradise, and it is quiet. In the best possible way, the reeds rustle in a breeze you don't feel, but somehow hear. Tall stalks shimmer with gold at the edges, swaying like dancers in slow, synchronized movements. Beyond them there's water, still and glassy, reflecting a sky that somehow glows without a sun. Boats glide across it silently, steered by the souls of the justified, and scattered along the horizon, homes, villages, fields, orchards, granaries, all perfectly kept. Everything you loved in life, rendered eternal, untouched by rot or rust or taxes. Yes, you're free from taxes now. You're welcome. This is the real estate you've been preparing for since your first sippy cup of beer back in kindergarten. The afterlife estate. Unlike some beliefs that picture heaven as some vague cloud zone with harps and maybe one good sofa, the ancient Egyptians had specifics. You don't just float around, you settle down, you get a house. A garden, fields of wheat that practically grow themselves, trees that bloom on cue. It's like Animal Crossing, but eternal. The Field of Reeds isn't a vague dream, it's Egypt, but perfected. No droughts. No war, no mosquitoes. Every path leads somewhere peaceful. Every day feels like mid-spring, and best of all, you don't age. Your limbs work, your back doesn't hurt, your hair is thick again. You're the best version of you, forever, and don't worry, you're not alone. Other souls wander these paths. Friends, family, neighbors, even rivals, but none of the tension from before remains. There's no anger, no resentment. Just a collective exhale, a society of the justified, farming and feasting and floating in gentle conversation with the gods. Some of them wave to you as you pass. Others offer a loaf of bread or invite you to join a bark ride down the celestial Nile. The mood is easy, like the first day of vacation, but it never ends, and you didn't forget your sunscreen. Your house, it's already furnished, painted with scenes of your life, stocked with jars of beer and bread, shaded by sycamore trees. One tree out front, that's Hathor, in cow form, poking her head through the leaves to offer you a drink. She does that. It's kind of her thing. Your land, already fertile, and not just metaphorically. The Egyptians believed that in Sekhet Aru you'd farm, yes, but only for joy. The land gave easily. You tossed a seed, a full harvest grew by morning. And remember your Ushabti team, they're still on call, you're allowed to supervise. Or just sit in the shade while they handle the ploughing. It's not about working, it's about participating in creation. Staying in tune with Ma'at, the divine balance of all things. Historians agree, paradise for the Egyptians wasn't some lazy cloud kingdom, it was perfected order, it was harmony. It was a place where everything functioned just as it should, where every song ended in the right key and every story was worth retelling. But here's a fun, quirky detail. Some tombs include deeds, like property contracts, for plots in the Field of Reeds. Actual papyrus scrolls declaring, this person, having done right by the gods and people, is now entitled to X acres of celestial land. It's like divine zoning permits. Bureaucracy didn't die, it just got more poetic. And just as in life, people had preferences. Some wanted to live near lakes, others next to fig orchards. One noble requested a view of a specific hill where he and his wife had once watched the sunrise. Touching, absolutely. Egyptians weren't just thinking about surviving the afterlife, they were thinking about living it. Fringe historians sometimes debate whether the Field of Reeds was imagined the same way by every class. Was it accessible to farmers and labourers, or just the elite who could afford the elaborate burial rites? The answer might be somewhere in between, but the dream was shared by all. You, of course, made it. You've got everything. Even board games. Yes, Senate makes a comeback here. Except this time, every move is blessed. You can play for hours beneath a flowering tree, cool breeze humming through the papyrus, a pitcher of beer gently sweating beside you. Your name, still inscribed back in the tomb, continues to echo through the land of the living. Offerings are left on your altar. Priests recite your prayers. Maybe once a year someone even lights incense and whispers your story aloud. You are not forgotten, which, in ancient Egyptian terms, means you are very much alive. And perhaps best of all, you can visit, not just across your estate, but across plains. You're permitted to leave the Field of Reeds in spirit, to visit your tomb, to hover gently near your loved ones or drift back through the doors of the temple where your name is spoken. You're not bound. You're connected. This is why you packed so carefully, why you were mummified so tightly, why your scrolls were custom written and your sandals gilded, not to show off, but to arrive whole. And now the breeze shifts, the reeds sway. The gods look your way, not as a stranger, but as someone expected. Welcome home. Section 13. You've made it. Your soul is home, drifting peacefully through fields of golden grain that never wilt, sipping from cups that never empty, wrapped in warmth that never fades. The air hums with quiet perfection. The gods smile when they pass, and eternity stretches ahead, not as a burden, but as a gentle invitation to simply exist. But even here, in this place where nothing rots, nothing breaks, and nothing aches, you brought a few keepsakes. Because when the tomb was sealed and the chants faded, your heart didn't only carry your deeds, it carried your memories, and your tomb, it reflects that. Let's take a quiet walk back through the chamber, through the things you brought not for survival, but for sentiment. That corner box carved in cedar. Open it. Inside is a lock of hair coiled carefully, wrapped in linen, maybe from your spouse. Maybe a child, maybe even your own, saved from a time when it still shimmered with youth. It's a piece of a life, unburnt by ritual, untouched by gods, preserved only by love. Nearby lies a letter. No, not an email, not a scroll. A small limestone tablet, scratched with your name and a few carefully chosen phrases. I walk with you always. Wait for me where the fig trees bloom. Ancient Egyptian tombs often included these, intimate notes etched into eternity. Some were romantic, some apologetic, some downright sassy. One such message found in a noblewoman's tomb reads, "If you forget me, I will come to you in dreams and remind you loudly." Now that's emotional commitment. These weren't just flourishes. These were threads, anchors tying you to the world of the living, not because you refused to let go, but because your story deserved to be remembered whole. Over on a shelf, a simple board game waits. Senate. You've probably already played it in the field of reeds, laughing as your bay glided the pieces along the board, but the version in your tomb, it's hand-carved. The pawns are smoothed by fingers long gone, the board's worn, maybe from years of family use. It might have even been your favourite set in life. And you chose to take it with you. Why? Because in Egyptian belief, play wasn't frivolous, it was transcendence. A well-played game mirrored the journey of the soul, obstacles, strategy, fate, a reminder that joy itself is a sacred force. And what about that broken mirror? Polished bronze, once shining, now dimmed by time. It doesn't reflect anymore, but it used to show your face. Your real one, not the gold mask, not the painted coffin smile. The version that aged, laughed, wept, was loved. It's here, not for vanity, but because you believed, like many Egyptians, that the soul needed to recognize itself. Then there are the child's toys, little carved animals, a spinning top, a flute. Maybe they belonged to your child, or maybe you were someone's child, and your mother tucked them beside you one final time, remembering your earliest laughter. Historians find these in tombs more often than you'd expect. Among jars of beer and spells of power, there are tiny hippos on wheels and dolls with real human hair. The Egyptians knew, what we love shapes who we are, and what we carry into death says what we cherished in life. Quirkier still, some tombs include things that seem almost silly. A favourite comb, a worn-out sandal, a chipped cup. One nobleman was buried with a bag of fishing hooks, rusted, ordinary, deeply unmagical. But scholars believe these weren't mistakes, these were roots, they grounded the soul. They whispered reminders, you were a person, you had mornings and hobbies and tea preferences. One man requested to be buried with his walking stick, so I may walk to the river as I did in life. Another with his writing tools, in case the gods need a scribe with steady hands. Even in the most opulent tombs, among walls bursting with gold, these little artifacts shine brightest. Not because they dazzle, but because they matter. And what of the statues? Not the gods this time, but the ones that look like you. Small, clay, sometimes smiling awkwardly. These weren't for vanity, they were soul vessels. Meant to catch a piece of your essence like a backup drive for your KA. If the body failed, the statue could serve as a home. Some even depict moments. One shows a man holding a lotus flower, mid-sniff, his eyes half closed in joy. It's a memory, frozen. A reminder that eternity isn't made of grand triumphs, but of quiet, repeating pleasures. Historians still debate the purpose of some of these objects. Were they truly used in the afterlife? Were they symbolic, or were they placed by grieving families as a final act of remembrance? Fringe theories suggest some might have even been part of ancient afterlife rituals we've simply forgotten. But the truth, the part that doesn't need debate, is this. The ancient Egyptians believed in continuity, that life flowed into death not like a door slamming shut, but like a river curving into the horizon. And you brought with you not just the tools to survive, but the pieces of life that made you you. So as you sit beneath the fig tree in the field of reeds, letting the light warm your face, you smile. Not because the wheat is endless, not because the beer is always cold, but because somewhere, tucked deep in a tomb back on Earth, there's a lock of hair and a half-played game board, and that more than any gold mask tells your story. You are whole, you are remembered, and your story has not ended. Section 14. The fields are quiet now, you've walked through the golden grain, you've played Senate in the shade. You've stood tall before gods, been weighed, been welcomed. You've unpacked your memories, those locks of hair, those soft-spoken tokens of love, and set them carefully on the shelf of eternity. And now? Now you start settling in, because the afterlife isn't a hotel stay. You're not just visiting. You've moved here, and that means it's time to get familiar with your new neighborhood. It's time to tour your afterlife real estate. Let's step outside your house. Yes, you have a house. If you've followed the rituals, paid the priests, whispered the spells, and stocked your tomb with all the right goods, then in the field of reeds you are the proud owner of a finely appointed metaphysical villa. Earthy walls, palm leaf roof, courtyard shaded by a fig tree or a sycamore. The architecture is humble but perfect, no cracks, no dust. No spiders in the corners, your floors are swept, your bed is always made. And best of all, it's exactly the way you wanted it. Historians studying tomb inscriptions have found requests for specific layouts. One person asked for a window facing the floodplain. Another wanted a pool lined with lotus flowers. No weeds. Some even requested mailboxes. Yes, tiny reed structures. Symbolic places to receive offerings from the living. Imagine that. A spiritual inbox for incense and bread loaves. Fringe scholars argue that some of these descriptions weren't metaphor, they were literal visions of a built afterlife, like blueprints for what your soul would inhabit, and whether that's spiritual real estate or metaphysical poetry, you still get to enjoy it. But your property doesn't end at the door, you also own fields. Yes, farming is involved. But remember, this is the field of reeds. Everything grows like magic. One step and the soil bursts with golden wheat. One breath and the breeze arranges it all into neat bundles. You can harvest it yourself joyfully, and maybe you do because there's a kind of sacred satisfaction in doing something again, or maybe you just let your Ashabti crew handle it. They're never late, they never need coffee, and they never complain about working weekends. Past the fields you might find a vineyard, rows of twisted vines heavy with grapes, plump and dark, waiting to be crushed into wine so sweet it makes your spirit hum. Inscriptions suggest that in paradise the drinks never run out and hangovers. Not a thing. There are gardens too, carefully tended, filled with lotus blossoms, date palms and onions. Egyptians loved onions. They even believed the layers symbolized eternity. You might laugh, but a lifetime of loving something earthy, pungent and persistent. That's eternal love right there. Let's not forget the canal behind your house. In the afterlife, water is sacred. It connects everything, your home, your memories, even the gods. You might have a little boat moored nearby, a skiff made of reeds or gleaming wood, ready to take you floating down the calm current. No crocodiles here, no silt, just a shimmer of divine stillness. You can paddle at sunset, watching the horizon glow, listening to the far-off echoes of songs sung in temples thousands of miles away. Because time here isn't linear, the past, present and future touch each other in ripples. Sometimes, if you listen closely, you can almost hear your name being spoken by someone visiting your tomb back in the world. And that tomb, it's part of your real estate too. Your tomb was built to last. The Egyptians didn't just pile stones into pyramids because they loved triangles. They believed the tomb was a portal, a place where your car and BA could return, where offerings could be left, where priests and loved ones could connect with you. Some tombs were even designed with ventilation shafts angled to align with specific stars, usually Orion or Sirius, so that the soul could escape and return with the light. That's not just architecture, that's astronomy as theology. One particularly lavish tomb featured a soul window, a tiny aperture facing the morning sun, meant to allow the Ka to absorb warmth each day. Others included doors carved into the west wall, false doors meant for the spirit to pass through. But here's the interesting bit. The living didn't think of the tomb as a place of mourning. It was a place of communication, a destination. Families visited. Priests recited offerings. Some even brought meals, sitting outside the tomb, eating and telling stories so their ancestor could join them through the false door. In a way, your tomb and your estate are two sides of the same coin. One sits in the earth, filled with relics. The other floats in a paradise of your making, filled with memories. They're linked. The offerings on one side nourish the soul on the other. The incense in the temple perfumes the air in your celestial garden. That's why your tomb included so many names. On statues, on walls, on vessels and bed frames and sandals. Repetition meant remembrance, and remembrance meant existence. So when a great-great-granddaughter visits the temple and lights a stick of incense while whispering your name, you feel it, not as smoke, but as warmth. As light returning to the soil of your field, as a breeze rippling the water behind your afterlife house, somewhere in your eternal kitchen, a jar refills itself. A flower blooms, you smile, because in Egyptian belief, being remembered was better than being immortal. You've built a perfect place, you've earned every brick of it, every golden reed, every glowing lotus, every corner of your orchard or shimmering pool. And here's the most beautiful thing, it's all real, because you believed it should be. That was the secret of the ancient Egyptians. They didn't wait to be proven right. They built eternity in advance, and now you live in it. Section 15. You lean against the frame of your afterlife house, content, the breeze warm, your fields rustling like whispers from the gods. The days stretch on, luminous and unhurried. You've unpacked your life, planted your peace, and decorated your eternity. But now comes the moment everyone wonders about. The moment your soul faces its greatest test. Not a monster, not a snake-headed gatekeeper. No, this is a test of truth. You're standing, well, floating, in the Hall of Two Truths. It's not just a courtroom, it's a cosmic theatre. The walls shimmer with stars. The floor reflects like still water. Torches flicker, though they cast no smoke. The gods are there, not just watching, but waiting. And there, before you, is the scale, balanced perfectly, ornate. Serious, this is the moment of the weighing of the heart, a ritual so sacred it appears in over 100 tombs, hundreds of papyri, and countless painted panels. You know this. You've prepared your whole life for this. On one side of the scale, your heart, the IB, believed to be the seat of emotion, intention, and memory. The Egyptians didn't think with their brains, they felt and remembered with their hearts. And on the other side, a single feather, the feather of Maat, goddess of truth, balance, and universal order. This isn't metaphorical. This is the moment where the universe itself checks your soul for honesty, your good deeds, your loyalty, your integrity, not your job title or wealth or even how many statues you owned. The weight of your soul's truth. Let's be clear, this test isn't just for show. If your heart is heavier than the feather, if it's weighed down by cruelty, selfishness, lies, you don't move on. You don't retry, there's no appeal process, enter Amit. She waits beneath the scale, silent, hulking. Her head is crocodile, her torso lion, her haunches hippo. The three most feared predators in Egypt, stitched into one being. She doesn't punish you, she erases you, your soul ceases to be. This, to the Egyptians, was worse than hell. It was non-being, no reincarnation, no haunting, no story. Just a name that falls out of memory, a silence that replaces existence. But if the scale balances, then your soul is true, then you move forward. Now here's the beautiful thing. The Egyptians didn't expect you to be perfect. That's why they gave you spell 30b from the Book of the Dead. You probably had it written on a scarab amulet resting on your chest, right above your heart. A spell that whispers, "O my heart which I had from my mother, do not stand against me as a witness. Do not turn me over to the keeper of the balance." In other words, don't snitch, dear heart. This little moment, half hope, half plea, is one of the most human details in the entire mythology. It says, I tried, I wasn't perfect, but I lived. I meant well, let that be enough, and maybe it is. Thoth, the divine scribe with the ibis head, stands beside the scale. He watches without judgment. Stylus in hand, he records the results in the great scroll of truth. He doesn't frown. He doesn't smile. He simply writes, because truth doesn't need applause. Meanwhile, Anubis steadies the scale. His paws are precise. He looks at you, not with menace, but with quiet assurance. He's not here to punish, he's here to guide. And in the background, the 42 assessors observe. Each represents one law, one virtue. You've already met them in your negative confession, when you declared, I have not lied, I have not stolen, I have not caused unnecessary sorrow. Historians still debate the origins of this list. Some say it evolved from legal codes, others think it was more symbolic, meant to shape the ideal citizen. Fringe scholars suggest these were personalized, depending on your status, but all agree these weren't just rules, they were reminders. Then Osiris, still silent, rises. He looks to the scale, to Thoth's scroll, and finally, to you, and here's where your name matters again. Because if you've done it right, if your name was spoken, remembered, written on stone and on the lips of the living, then even if you stumbled in life, your story continues. The gods believe in those who are remembered, and in that moment of stillness, the scale is even, balanced. Your heart and the feather rest without tilt. Thoth nods. Osiris raises a hand. And behind him, a new gate opens, glowing reeds, gentle water, music faint in the wind. You have passed. You may enter the field of reeds not just as a visitor, but as a citizen of eternity. And here's a soft truth, something not carved in stone but felt between the lines of every wall painting, every offering, every delicate script scratched on a clay shard. The real judgment isn't whether you lived without flaw, it's whether you lived with intention, whether you loved. Whether you left pieces of yourself behind that still move hearts even after the tomb's door has long been shut. You did that. You remembered who you were, and now the gods do too. Section 16, you've passed the test.